Plato, in his dialogues, was apparently open to gender equality. Plato believed that the human soul is inherently sexless. The soul is eternal and unchangeable, thus carrying the same qualities with it from body to body, from life to life. On the other hand, one of his students, at the Academy of Athens, expressed the belief that women were only fit to submit to the will of men. According to Aristotle, women's souls were not sovereign by nature. The human being is a union of body and soul, and, as he argued, nature intended two tasks for women, procreation and nurturing. Perhaps it could be said that misogyny was born of the spirit of the times, and apart from the fact that its roots can be traced back to Greek philosophy, it is not limited to a specific era, and what's more, it accompanies all of Western philosophy. However, we must also see that these philosophers, although they were children of their time, often misunderstood them and deliberately took their sentences out of context when they wanted to prove their theories, such like the West is sexist. Immanuel Kant's, for instance, the central figure of Western philosophy attitude toward women was ambivalent. While denying them certain high insights, he viewed woman as the very embodiment of the beautiful and even the sublime. The virtue of a woman is a beautiful virtue, wrote Kant. That of a male sex should be a noble virtue. Women will avoid the wicked, not because it is unjust, but because it is repulsive, and to them virtuous actions mean morally beautiful ones. The quote clearly shows that Kant viewed women not from an ethical, but from an aesthetic perspective. Arthur Schopenhauer, German philosopher, had much more harsher judgment on women, writing, "It is because women's reasoning powers are weaker that they show more sympathy for the unfortunate than men, and consequently take a kindlier interest in them. On the other hand, women are inferior to men in matters of justice, honesty, and conscientiousness. Again, because their reasoning faculty is weak, things clearly visible and real, and belonging to the present, exercise a power over them which is rarely counteracted by abstract thoughts, fixed maxims, or firm resolutions, in general, by regard for the past." Continuing by these words, in almost every nation, both of the New and Old World, and even among the Hottentots, property is inherited by the male descendants alone. It is only in Europe that one has departed from this. That the property which men have with difficulty acquired by long continued struggling and hard work should afterwards come into the hands of women, who, in their want of reason, either squander it within a short time or otherwise waste it, is an injustice as great as it is common, and it should be prevented by limiting the right of women to inherit. It seems to me that it would be a better arrangement if women, be they widows or daughters, only inherited the money for life secured by mortgage, but not the property itself or the capital, unless they lacked male descendants. It is men who make the money, and not women, therefore women are neither justified in having unconditional possession of it nor capable of administrating it. Women should never have the free disposition of wealth, strictly so called, which they may inherit, such as capital, houses, and estates. They need a guardian always, therefore they should not have the guardianship of their children under any circumstances whatever. The vanity of women, even if it should not be greater than that of men, has this evil in it, that it is directed on material things. Schopenhauer argues that women are intellectually inferior to men and naturally suited to different roles. He believes women's nature is to provide comfort, and in this he hardly differs from the ancient Greek conception. There is a good principle which created order, light, and man, and an evil principle which created chaos, darkness, and woman. Wrote Pythagoras. The male is by nature superior, and the female inferior, and the one rules and the other is ruled. This principle of necessity is extended to all mankind. Quoting Aristotle, Nietzsche argued that in the racial economy the place of women is comparable to a nation of slaves, while that of men is comparable to a nation of masters. Women's position in the world is much the same. The bearing and rearing of children takes a toll on their physical strength, and consequently makes it impossible for them to win by force if their ideas and those of men differ. To dilute the sting of this impossibility, women make a virtue of it, of modesty, humility, self-sacrifice, and loyalty, to win in spite of it. They cultivate cunning, which usually takes the form of hypocrisy, cunning, falsification, and a more or less disguised appeal to the masculine sexual instinct. All this is so often observed in everyday life that it has become commonplace. A woman is physically unable to force a man to do what she wants, but her inability to do so becomes a sentimental weapon against him, and her flattery does the rest. For example, the sight of a strong man betrayed by a weak woman is not uncommon, and Samson is not the first or last giant to fall to a Delilah. Indeed, there is hardly a household in the whole world in which the familiar drama is not played out and acted out every day. The question is whether these ideas can be abstracted from the patriotic spirit of the age, and to what extent they are a function of an above-average intellectuality. Or do they feed on the bitterness and resentment that certain intellectuals are unable to become physically attractive to women? High intellectuality, which is more characteristic of men, like madness, arouses contempt for the excessive enthusiasm for banality. It is a fact that women are far more emotionally developed than men, which is due to the anatomy of the female body, as it is designed for childbearing. Consequently, raising an unborn child requires compassion and empathy, which men rarely have. But it is precisely this anatomical difference that makes women extremely reactive and irritating to abstract thinkers. Many high intellectuals would be unjustly accused of misogyny. Many would rather point out the limitations of women, but because they cannot understand women in full depth, their judgments about them are limited and one-sided, which is the limitation of high intellectuals. It is certain that these limitations are not imposed by patriotism, nor by misogyny, or by male chauvinism, but by nature itself, just as it can be stated regarding the emancipation of women that of all civilizations the Western one is the least sexist, and most egalitarian. Either way, every human being in this world deserves to be judged on their own individual abilities, values, and character, regardless of gender in every sense of word.